Well, at least they scored this time. Eventually. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where, unfortunately for the second time in 3 nights, the Vegas Golden Knights come into Seattle and take a 3-0 lead late into the third. At least fortunately for the Kraken fans in the building, this time Seattle doesn't end up getting shut out at home and does score late in the game, but Vegas still hangs on to win 5-2. After a pretty disappointing outing for the Kraken on Wednesday, where they did get shut out 3-0 by the Golden Knights, the lineup remains pretty similar to the one we saw on Wednesday and have seen now for a few games in a row. Still no Hayden Fleury or Jaden Schwartz, both still injured, with really the only major difference for the Kraken being that instead of Chris Driedger in net, who was coming off of a couple of pretty good games in a row, it's Philip Grubauer, with Hackstall saying that they needed some leadership in that position and a good outing, which, to be fair, the goals that Grubauer does let up, only one of them I really would put on him. Still though, with the momentum Driedger had in the last couple of games, personally I would have liked to see him get another chance. Either way, this is a platoon that they're looking at going forward, and that's how it plays tonight. Or in this one. And I will say that while the score did look familiar from Wednesdays with 10 minutes left in the third, the way that we got there felt pretty different to that Wednesday game, where the Kraken had an early push but then pretty much disappeared for the rest of the game until very late in it. In this one, Seattle came out with some clear motivation to not have that same story be written a second time in 3 nights. Really, outside of one very good scoring chance for Dodonov early in the game as he comes down through the slot and gets a pass just in front of the net that Grubauer is able to come up with the big save on, it was largely Seattle that had the better of this game throughout pretty much the entire first period. Slowly building that momentum, Kuhlman gets a very good chance of his own not long after that Dodonov one is saved, which he unfortunately ends up just missing wide on. However, just past the halfway point of the first period, back at the other end of the ice against that flow of play, the one chance that Vegas does get sees Martinez, who's kind of along the goal line, feed a puck out in front of the net, bank it off of Eichel's stick and between Grubauer's legs, where it does get stopped at first, but then as Grubauer goes to close his legs up and get that 5-hole closed, unfortunately, he ends up kicking the puck into the back of his own net to give Vegas that 1-0 lead. Regardless of the scoreboard and Vegas getting that early 1-0 lead, Seattle though just continues to maintain that momentum that they had been building and continue to build on it as this first period goes along. Unfortunately, they just aren't quite able to turn that into an answer goal, and we eventually get to the end of the first period with the score still 1-0, much like it was 2 nights prior. So sure, the scoreboard does look the same as it did at this point in the game on Wednesday, but again, the way we got here is completely different. The Kraken have been carrying the momentum of this game for the most part anyway, and definitely have the better of the scoring chances to this point. And especially with an early chance by Kuhlman in the second period that goes off of a post and out, it feels like Seattle might have a pretty good chance at coming back, and it's 2-0. Immediately following Kuhlman putting that shot off the post, right back the other way, it's Dodonov finding a wide open Jack Eichel right in front of the Kraken net, all by himself, and with all the time in the world, just him and Grubauer, he picks his spot and puts the puck in it to give Vegas that 2-0 lead, or at this point, just give Eichel a 2-0 lead. Following this second Jack Eichel goal, there's a few minutes of relatively back and forth play before Seattle eventually does start to regain that momentum. And then once again, back the other way, it's Dodonov, still not traded by the Golden Knights, who finds this time a wide open Theodore, who splits the defense right down the middle into the slot and gets a wide open shot off and scores again. It's now 3-0. Now for Grubauer, while at the end of the night, his stats really don't end up looking very good at all, unlike Driedger's the previous 2 games. Again, I've said it a number of times this season, and I'll say it again, there's a reason that they use shutouts to determine games after they're still tied post-overtime, and it's not because it's easy on the goaltenders. And that's even within a shootout where the goaltender knows that one-on-one chance is coming and has time to at least prepare for it. Unlike here, where Grubauer has now twice seen completely open chances come from right in front of him, with basically nothing to speak of as far as defense is concerned, and he just has to try to make the best of it, and on these 2 occasions isn't quite able to make the save happen. And sure, those are the types of saves that great goaltenders do tend to make more often than others, but at the same time, not playing defense in front of a goaltender is not really a recipe for success. I mean, just ask Edmonton or Toronto how that's gone over the last few seasons. Regardless of whose fault it is though, either way, at this point in the game, it's now once again 3-0 Vegas for the second time in Seattle in 3 nights. And yeah, if you thought the fans were frustrated, just wait till you see what Jared McCann has. Right off the ensuing faceoff, McCann and Amadio drop gloves. And yes, that's Jared McCann for the Seattle Kraken, dropping gloves and getting into a fight, which, from a strategic standpoint, having your leading goal scorer get into a fight and go into the box for at least 5 minutes while you're down 3 at home, probably not the best choice. But it turns out, for McCann at least, this fight was maybe not fully thought of in a strategic way. Sure, there was some part of him that was doing this to energize the bench, which at this point did seem like it was completely dead. Generally speaking, there's two kinds of hockey fights. There's the ones where it's a guy trying to get his team riled up and get the bench back into the game. Typically kind of a respectful fight where the guys go and throw their punches, but then maybe give each other a pat on the back afterwards, saying good fight and all that. And then there's the ones where there's clear anger involved behind those punches. And this fight was kind of both. On Amadio's side, you can tell that he clearly thinks this is one of those respectful, get the energy into the game type of fights. Meanwhile, for McCann, well, in the moment, and he would say as much after the game, this was all about frustration just boiling over to a breaking point for him. And boy, did he give it to Amadio. Unfortunately for poor Amadio, who seemed to be expecting a strictly business fight, McCann was absolutely seeing red. And while it wasn't necessarily Amadio that McCann was mad at, those punches were clearly with anger behind them. Even if that anger was at all of the bad bounces that have gone against the Kraken over the course of the season, all the losses, and everything else, including the shutout loss the night previous, and now a 3-0 deficit in this one. And for McCann, that frustration was even clear after Amadio goes to a knee, surrendering in the fight, as he throws his helmet across the ice and into the boards as he goes into the box. Eventually, he would actually end up leaving the box and going to the locker room to get his hand looked at, which, even post-game, was very bloodied and beaten up. He says it's perfectly fine, all just surface stuff, which is a fortunate thing for the Kraken. But still, yeah, there was some anger in this one, and it definitely got the crowd into it. Though even with the crowd now into the game, the bench still did seem to take a little bit more convincing and take some time to get into the game themselves. Eventually, finally getting some scoring chances back on the Vegas net and trying to at least prevent a second shutout in a row. They do end up getting a power play out of it, which doesn't really do much of anything early on, does get a couple of chances late, but doesn't get on the board. The Kraken are at least able to maintain momentum out of the failed power play, but again, aren't able to get anything into the back of the net by the end of the second. And in the final seconds of it, after Gord laid a few pretty big hits along the boards, Vegas eventually has enough of it, and it's Gord's turn to drop gloves as we have another fight in these final minutes. Or actually, final seconds. I think there was only like 3 seconds left. And I suppose, to be fair, it wasn't just Gord that was laying big hits for the Kraken, as all night long, the Kraken as a team seemed to be letting out frustration over that previous shutout, laying hit after hit. I mean, this had really been going on all game long, even before it was 3-0. Even as far as back into the first, where it was 1-0, or even before Vegas scored that first goal, both Susie and Larson absolutely laid a couple of guys out on the ice with massive hits that got the crowd into it at that point. Unfortunately, the Vegas goals kind of took that energy out until McCann's fight. By the end of the game, the one stat that the Kraken absolutely dominated in was hits, where they out-hit Vegas 31-9. Unfortunately, while Seattle was hitting everything that moved on the ice, the one thing they weren't able to hit was the back of the net with a puck. And even in spite of them, again, getting the better of the chances through the first 10 minutes of the third, that still remained true as we got to the half point of the final period. At which point, coming once again back into the offensive zone for the Kraken, thanks to some pretty sloppy defense from the Golden Knights, Borgen's able to get a puck up to McCann, who's all alone in front of the net, just him and Thompson, and he goes from one side of the net, carrying the puck along to the other side, taking Thompson with him, and instead of taking the shot, drops a beautiful pass to Wennberg coming down through the slot, who fires and buries it into the other side of the net past Thompson to give the Kraken their first goal of the game. It's now 3-1, and thank goodness, finally the Kraken put a puck past Thompson and into the back of the net, not at least getting shut out for a second game in a row. And for McCann, after that beauty of a fight in the second, it's a beautiful play to set up Wennberg for this goal. Again, drawing Thompson from one side of the net to the other, as Thompson has to follow McCann, who's right in front of him. But McCann drops that pass back, and Wennberg is able to put it right back into that other side of the net that Thompson has had to vacate to follow McCann. Sure, it's Wennberg's goal, but this one is all McCann. The Kraken tried to build some momentum off of this and get another goal in to actually make a game of this. Unfortunately, they just aren't quite able to do it, and then Larson gets called for delay of game, putting a puck over the boards, sending him to the box and Vegas to the power play. The good news is that the Seattle penalty kill actually gets the better scoring chance on a Carson Soucy shorthanded shot. That doesn't go though, and while it is killed off, so are 2 very valuable minutes of game time. At this point, Seattle does go for the empty net, trying to again make a game of this late. However, after a couple of minutes and getting a couple of chances, it's Marchessault who finds the back of the net from deep in his own zone to make it 4-1, and yeah, that will pretty much do it. Or will it, as it's Kole Lind carrying the puck into the offensive zone alone. He just carries it around for a little bit and then fires off a shot, and it's in! Kole Lind with his first ever NHL goal, and it's 4-2. Still Vegas with the lead, but the Kraken have 2 on the board. Yeah, it turns out the game is still over. Seattle goes empty net again and actually gets a power play, so it's 6-on-4. But once again, Vegas finds the empty net, so it's 5-2, and that is how the game would end. So again, unfortunately, the Kraken do lose to Vegas in both of these back-to-back games, both at home, and now have lost all 4 to their older expansion brother, which kind of sucks because I was definitely hoping that they would play a little bit of spoiler here and hurt the hopes that Vegas has of going to the playoffs, as they're still on the outside looking in, and at this point kind of looking like they might have a hard chance getting into the playoffs at all, which was a pretty big surprise considering what this team looked like they were going to be coming into the season. Now they've had all sorts of issues with injuries, but yeah. For the Kraken, they've definitely got to get something figured out on offense. The goaltending honestly really wasn't even that bad in this game. It just defense let them down a couple of times, and then obviously 2 empty netters. There's nothing you can do about that. Yeah, I mean, getting shut out in 60 minutes one night and then 2 nights later, getting shut out through the first 50 minutes. Yeah, again, they've got to get something figured out there. At least on the bright side, we did see the return of that hard-hitting game that we kind of have been missing out on from the Kraken since really Tanev's injury back in December. Plus, even if it did come out through frustration and anger rather than the excitement that we would like to see more often, we got to see a lot of passion from at least a few of the Kraken players, and certainly the ones that are going to be sticking around for a while, like Jared McCann and Yanni Gourde. And of course, finally, the big story of the night for the Kraken, even in the loss, is that first ever NHL goal for Kole Lind, who, it has to be said, had it coming now for a while, having had a lot of scoring chances and creating a number of those himself. He's really been playing well lately since coming up at the trade deadline. And yeah, finally gets that first NHL goal, becoming the first ever player in Seattle Kraken history to score their first NHL goal with the franchise. Past that, I'm ready to put this game and these last 2 games in the rearview mirror and move forward. Let me know what you think down in the comments section of this game, or really just in general where the Kraken are at this point in the season, maybe the Jared McCann fight or Kole Lind's first goal. And until next time, if you've made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there's buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel, so I'd appreciate you using them. And as always, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and go Kraken!